There is no such thing as an unbuildable model, and this video comes as a proof that all you need is the desire to accomplish the task. Follow along and I will show you the hoops I had to jump through until this pretty good looking MiG-17 landed in the display case. As it is quite often the case, all started with the cockpit. There are some details provided, be it crude and somewhat soft. Given the tiny aperture and the small scale, I decided that it will be for the better to display the model with closed canopy. With this in mind, I think you'll agree that adding extra details would be a waste of time, so I simply assembled the cockpit as it is. Well, simply might not be the best description of the situation, as there were no registered devices whatsoever. With the assembly battle won, I went to prime the parts with Mr. Surfacer 1500 Grey Primer. The color of choice for the cockpit was dark ghost grey from Tamiya. Reference images show variety of colors, so I just picked one that I like the most. The dashboard is black with a white vertical line, so I applied a masking tape strip over the primer and painted the dashboard. The light grey color of the primer should do the job just fine. The easiest way to fill the instrument faces with black was with a sketch pen. The cushions on the seatback and the headrest I brush painted with black. Next, it was time to do some weathering. For the panel line wash, I chose dark grey color from Tamiya's panel line accent color range. I will put links for the tools and materials down in the description in case something I use caught your eye. After I removed the excess wash using a fine brush and white spirit, everything was covered with a layer of semi-gloss varnish. This coat is a great foundation for the dry brushing technique. I used white oil paint to enhance the visual appearance of the raised details and edges. Using a silver pencil, I created some paint distress down to bare metal. To be honest, it does not do much on such a light base color, but I did it anyways. I glued down some super simplistic masking tape seat belts, and while the glue was curing, I added a splash of color in a few selected areas. It is always good to have some high contrast color in play. The seat belts were painted in a more suitable color, and then I glued them down on the cushion. After that, I glued the seat and the control stick in the top. To glue the cockpit in the fuselage, I first secured it in position using blue tack, and then cemented the plastic in place. For more stable joint, I filled the empty spaces with pieces of sprue and applied more glue. I also glued in some fishing weight in the nose. Otherwise, this model is a 100% tail-seater. The super shallow and ugly tailpipe was the final thing to glue in order to join the fuselage halves together. For the set joining, I used super glue mixed with black pigment. This concoction not only glues the halves, but acts like a filler. On top of that, the black color makes the sanding a bit easier to judge. The glue needs some time to set properly, so I used that window to tackle the resin nose. As you can see, it is molded in a way that makes the actual part one whole piece with the casting block. Very convenient. After a few hours of sewing, chiseling and whatnot, the nose was ready for installation. On the front of the cockpit, over the instrument panel shroud, there are a few items that I think are worth representing, albeit in greatly simplified fashion, but the front windshield glass is big enough so that they can be easily seen. One of those details is the viewport for the radar screen, which is a really big difference between a regular MiG-17 and the PF version. Another small detail suggestion that I'm doing are what looks like canopy rails, just so this area does not sit so empty. Now that the detailing is done, I will brush paint the shroud with flat black paint. After some off-camera masking effort, I am painting the deck behind the ejection seat in the same color as the cockpit, dark ghost grey. The rest of the cockpit surroundings I am spraying with flat black. And while I have the black in the airbrush, why not spray a guide coat on the seams? To enhance the visibility of the details, I am dry brushing them with a minuscule amount of white oil paint. The rear deck got some dark grey panel liner. I decided to glue the two canopy parts together. It seems easier to find a proper location for the assembly this way, at least in this build which offers no help. After a little bit of masking effort, I had to continue fiddling with the nose section. This includes gluing down a sheet of plastic, lots of sanding, then filler, then more sanding. Rinse and repeat until I was happy with the result. Very time consuming, but also very needed. While on the topic of sanding, it was as good of a time as any to deal with the rest of the joints and also to reduce the thickness of the trailing edge on the tail. With all that done and fresh coat of primer applied, I went ahead to scribe a few lost panel lines. Another issue to solve in this area was the joint between the windscreen and the fuselage. On the real aircraft, the joint is covered with an overlapping panel, so here I did my best to recreate this using putty. And I think it worked out pretty well. After all that done, the fuselage is pretty much dialed in. So I went ahead to sort out the wings, and boy did they need sorting. Having a full house of ill fitment, I did my best to alleviate the issues as much as possible before assembly. You know, the usual stuff, trimming and shimming. Then I joined the house together, minding mostly the alignment of the leading edge. With that done, I deepened the panel lines so that they can survive the upcoming sanding. To fill the trench-like seam line, I used the black pigment CA glue once again. After some sanding, the seam was nowhere to be found even under a coat of primer. Therefore, I proceeded to correct the wing to fuselage joints. For me, it is always better to make the necessary adjustments before the assembly rather than filling and sanding steps or other junk after the fact. It is also more convenient to do the riveting when the fuselage and the wings are separate entities, if that's possible and you are willing to go through the trouble. Well worth the effort though. As far as assembly goes, well, let's just say that at least the wings have slots to fit in, which cannot be said about the horizontal stabilizers. And as you can clearly see, the prior fiddling with the joint has paid its dividends. As you very well know, a gloss black undercoat is a must for a good looking natural metal finish. So that's just what I did. While that was curing, I tackled the landing gear, which had to be unearthed from the tons of molding imperfections. Of course, I had to manhandle some fitment issues as well. Next up, I masked around the wheel wells and painted them in light blue. You may wonder why I am masking at this point, and the simple reason is that I don't want to reapply gloss black to hide blue overspray. After the same masking treatment, the radar cover on the nose received a few coats of green paint. Removing the masking was a pleasure as always, and after that I had to do another masking effort, this time to protect the paint I laid down previously. And now for the piece de resistance. My favorite base color for the natural metal finish is the polished aluminum from AK's Extreme Metal range. I applied that in a mottled fashion, having intertwined clouds of higher and lower opacity. This gives the finish patches of higher and lower depth of the reflection, because the reflection itself is a product of the gloss black base coat, so the thicker the metal coat is, the lower the reflection will be. It looked fine and dandy, but I was not after such a finish, so from here on the shine will only deteriorate. To further break up the surface monotony, I masked off several panels and painted them with a 50-50 mix of polished aluminum and dark aluminum. I did not want to have too stark of a difference, hence this color mixture. It looks so much better, doesn't it? After the paneling was done, I did some post shading with the same color, mostly for experimental purposes. Later I masked off another batch of panels, which I painted with straight dark aluminum. And once again some post shading on random areas was applied, and then the natural metal finish paint job was completed. Looks great if you ask me, but there is more to come. In my opinion, every natural metal finish airplane needs a little bit of color to look as best as it could. Luckily, the one I am doing has the walkways on the wing roots in the same green color as the radar cover on the nose, and some more on the air brakes. Another colorful addition were the red board numbers on each side of the fuselage. The masks I made myself with the help of a 2-axis cutting machine. The Bulgarian Air Force insignia is too finicky for me to pull off in this scale, but the decals did the job just fine. I wanted to add some service stencils, and for that I had to dig into my spare decals box. I found a suitable set and installed a few selected pieces in place. That's why I never throw out leftover decals. One can never know when they will come handy. The insignia decals I have are not of utmost quality. I knew from previous builds they would not surrender even under the harshest decal solutions I have. Therefore, I went to re-rivet directly on the decals. I sealed them with metallizer sealer from Model Master, and while that was curing, I painted my scratch-built FOD covers in red. Then I brush painted the board number on each cover and did a bare metal chipping effect using a sponge and some silver acrylic paint. Since I did a decent job with the FODs, I had no fitment issues. How refreshing. On to the juicy stuff. I wanted this model to carry the feeling of an operational jet fighter, not too dirty but not too clean either. So I started off with an overall panel line wash using Tamiya's dark grey panel line accent color. This does work well with the natural metal finish, blues, greys and even white colors. To remove the excess product I used a kitchen towel and a small amount of white spirit. Removing the material in the direction of the airflow provides with subtle streaking effect. Next, I applied a flat varnish on the green areas, and while that was curing, I did some oil paint streaking. Again with oil paint, I did a fading dirt effect from the panel line where the fuselage splits so that the ground crew can access the engine. I figured that this joint is going to collect some oily residue that would eventually find its way out and then spread backwards due to the airflow. On the belly I did some stippling with the oil paint because that's where the dirt will accumulate, sliding from the upper parts while the airplane is resting on the ground. To enforce this notion, I blended the oil paint upwards with a fan brush, thus creating some subtle streaking. With the flat varnish on the green paint properly cured, I went ahead to create both superficial paint distress and bare metal chipping effect using watercolor pencils. After the weathering was done, it was time to finish the assembly of the model, starting with the gear legs and then the gear bay doors. After the wing-mounted fuel tanks were glued down, I installed the scratch-built pitot tubes and the cannon barrels. Don't forget to join my mailing list and get notified each time I post a new video. Don't rely on YouTube to do it. Thank you for watching, and until next time, happy modeling, fellas!